Chapter 19, Music. In this chapter, I talk about the Numa Numa song, new revenue streams, and making your fans fall in love with you. I would have lost an enormous amount of money if a year ago you told me that I was writing a book called AskGaryVee and one of the chapters was going to be about music. I would have made a bet against it for money that matters. Money that matters is something me and my brother AJ talk about all the time. When, all your buddies are always betting and things of that nature, you got to actually push them to a level where they're uncomfortable so that the bet actually matters. So if you want to pick something up, you have a friend that's always betting and it doesn't really matter, get them to money that matters. That's when it's interesting. Yet, as Stephanie Land, my writer, and the rest of the team and I worked to pull together the material for the book, we discovered that I had answered a number of questions about music. Who knew? Most people who care about the art form do not respect my relationship with music. I have no musical talent, and my contemporaries often disrespect my taste. One of my favorite things to do is put a favorite song on continuous loop and listen to it for 5 to 7 hours. I once listened to Bone Thugs and Harmony's song First of the Month through the entire train trip from Boston to New York, and I didn't take the Excella. While making the final edits of this book, I listened to Drake's Back-to-Back on loop. But you'll also find Lionel Richie and Cyndi Lauper on my iPod. This is fun for me. I don't have amazing passion for the indie or hip-hop scene, but I'm excited to see how many musicians have real talent mixed with entrepreneurial DNA, and I'm passionate about seeing how the changing marketing and communications landscape has provided opportunity for them. Think about it. Would anybody have ever heard of Dragostea Dinti if it weren't for Gary Vaynerchuk? You're probably thinking you still haven't heard of it, but you have. It's more commonly known in this country as the Numa Numa song. And Gary Vaynerchuk is the guy who uploaded a home video of himself lip-syncing to it onto the internet back in 2004. The song went on to become an internationally best-selling single. And while the band who wrote it, Ozone, split up, Gary Vaynerchuk endures and, according to his website, continues to make music and videos. Carly Rae Jepsen, whose new pop album is being called one of the best of the decade, had been writing and recording songs in Canada for several years before Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez first tweeted about her catchy song, Call Me Maybe, and created the famously goofy YouTube dance video to go along with it that turned her into an international star. So you know how I'm always saying that you don't want to obsess about how many followers and fans you have, but rather about who your followers and fans are? And that the quality of your content and engagement with them is everything it should be. That's why. It used to be that in order to get any attention, you had to make 1,000 demos and pray that some music producer would bother to listen and sign you up for a record deal. After which, you were at the mercy of that label. But now, aspiring musicians have far greater control over their careers, and many more avenues they can take to get their music heard. They don't have to please record labels anymore. They just have to please their fans. Do you have any idea how many bands and artists have been able to break out and become profitable because they knew how to use social media like Vine and YouTube to reach their audience? These are the same bands that would have never been able to get so much as a meeting with a major label 15 years ago. For sure, there are fewer artists who go platinum, but the long tail has gotten even longer and allows a greater number of performers to make money. That's why I don't understand why so many people continue to bemoan the fate of the music industry and complain that musicians can't get a fair shake. They sure as hell can, if they hustle, that is. They just have to stop thinking of themselves as artists and start thinking of themselves as a business.
Hey guys, it's Leo from This Week in Tech again with more questions for Gary Vee. Since music itself doesn't create income anymore, what advice do you have for musicians wanting to make their living playing music in the 21st century?
First and foremost, if you're a musician, you have to get out of the romance of how it used to be. Like, I'm sorry that, CDs and records and tapes aren't the way you make money anymore, and it was so great for the 60s and 70s and 80s. It was, but they didn't have the internet, so how great was their lives? Look, the bottom line is the romance elimination is number one. Way too many people are romantic. Number two, you have to start thinking 360. First and foremost, music lives on attention. You need people to hear it, to pick up momentum. And so if you're not really thinking about your strategy on Instagram, Snapchat, Vine, Facebook, Twitter, on and on and on, you're creating an enormous vulnerability to not be discovered. You've got to play, you've got to go and play live music, you've got to create music, and you have to distribute music. I think the other thing you need to think about is your revenue streams. So for example, a lot of influencers out there these days on Instagram. You too can. For example, one of my favorite startups I'm paying attention to right now that I'm not talking about is called Musical.ly. Why don't you have your original music on that platform and get it discovered? I was fascinated by when some songs from the 80s and 90s popped to the top of the charts because they were used in Vines last summer. So you have to get distribution. More importantly, you have to think about different ways about making your money. For example, you have to be 360 in the way of thinking about merchandising. You have to sell t-shirts and hats and sponsored posts on Instagram. You've got to make your money differently than you used to. I think about it like this. Everybody said that musicians were dead and the music industry was dead, but it's flourishing. There's more than ever. The art will never die. The way it's distributed and the way people make money has changed. It's no different than journalists. 3 or 4 years ago, everybody was talking about journalists being dead because the newspapers and magazines were in trouble. Yes, but I have 2 full-time journalists on my team now, something I would have never done because I realized everybody's in the content business, and I think we're going through the golden era of journalism because there'll be millions of places you can write for. Now, if you're 32 and you grew up in an educated family and your dream was to write for the New Yorker, the world's changed on you. Sorry, maybe it's now BuzzFeed Politics. That's how the world works. To really create income in music, you're going to have to make it around t-shirts, live events, experiences, swag, just a million different ways you may have not thought about in the past. And here's some good news. If you're great enough, Adele, Taylor Swift, these kind of characters, you will make income from your music. More importantly, unlike 1960s, 70s, and 80s culture, if you weren't good enough, you had no option. You became a barber, you became a homemaker, you became a policeman, or you became a CEO, but you didn't become a musical monster. Today, the practicality of making $100,000 a year and playing your music and having that love is much more real because of all these micro income revenue streams, and you get to keep all of it instead of sharing most of it with the label and most of it with your manager. And so the rules have changed. Adjust.
As a private music teacher, I have limited hours to teach. I'd like your thoughts on how to increase my income and my brand.
Look, I have a personal full-time trainer. His name's Mike, right? He gets paid to only train me. But over the last 18 months, I've watched him build out his internet business by building his personality on YouTube and Snapchat, and by using those funnels and blogging and writing and guest blogging and all the tactics we talked about in this book, by building up more of a profile. And now he has, and he has for a little while, a internet class version of what he does for me. It doesn't cost as much as it costs me because he's with me every second. But for several $100s a month, hundreds, soon to be thousands of people pay him to be trained by him via technology. That's exactly what I would do if I was a music teacher. Take the top 20% of what you're doing, charge more, have that world, and start going on YouTube and other places like that and producing content so people discover you. The other way you can do it is you can start looking at things like Skillshare and Udemy and Creative Collective and go to those places where they can sell your music course and you can share with them if you don't think you have the talent to monetize yourself. What I mean by that is Mike sells direct to people, but you could go and sell an $80 course on Skillshare and share on $40 each because that's how they split it or whatever the deal is on these platforms. There's an enormous way, better than ever. This is the greatest era to ever be alive for this kind of stuff. If you're a single practitioner, you need to become a media company. You need to take your phone and you need to start making content. You do that for 7 years and eventually you can hire a D-Rock and they can follow you around and you don't have to do it. But you can absolutely scale a $50 to $100 to $200 a month product that can teach people throughout the world. If you're massively talented and you have the dollars, you can team up with somebody who can do technology and you can create an app and sell that for $2. And that's infinite scale, right? You can have 1 million people paying you $2 a month for your teaching. So it comes down to your talent. First and foremost, there's talent level 1. You're just good enough to teach people. You're old school, you're 70s and 80s, you don't understand. But if you're listening to this book, I think you can be talent number 2, which means you've got content that you're recording and selling on the internet for scale. If you're uber talented in number 3, you go for mass scale and you go for less dollars, $2, $3 a month, but you build out an app or something incredible that scales infinitely.
I'm a music producer. How can I use social to promote my content?
I mean, this is kind of, I really just got angry with this question. I really just got angry at this question. Like anybody else. I mean, if you're producing, you could be filming, you can live stream, you can Periscope and Meerkat while you're in sessions, you can document through Snapchat 24 hours a day, your process, you can take selfies with the artists that are coming in. I mean, guys, it's the same game, whether you're picking up garbage for a living or if you're running the country, whether you're a landscaper, whether you're a baker, whether you're raising kids. I mean, do you know how many people would pay, Mr. Mom $80 a month or $8,000 a month to teach them how to do it. Every profession in the world, like we talked about B2B, if you know how to produce content, you can win. And when you're a music producer, you've got a lot of people interested. And so I think the real question is, how do I motivate myself to get started? Not what do I do? It's not super complicated. You can produce content all day long. I would love to understand. I mean, that's not true. I wouldn't. Millions of people would love to understand what's on your mind, Sally or Rick, as you're producing this music. You could be live streaming right now and say, oh, wait, you see what Rihanna just did there? I don't like that. This is why I'm thinking. Or you see what Ritrana just did there? She's an up-and-coming artist. She needs to do this. And so I'm just flabbergasted by people's lack of awareness that people will find everything interesting as long as you produce it and distribute it. Now, produce it and distribute it and then have a certain level of actual fans, meaning everybody can get 15 people to care. I believe the new 15 minutes of fame is everybody's got 15 fans. If what you're putting out is interesting, that's when you start getting into 1,500, 15,000, 150,000, 1.5 million.
I'm going to kill Gary for making me read this one as a diehard 49ers fan. Here it goes. I'm holding back tears and my heart is heavy because the Seahawks lost and I bet $225. That's like 4 Xbox games and an Arizona iced tea. I've listened to Drake, The Weeknd, and even Party Next Door, but the pain is too much. How do I cope?
I mean, the Seahawks have won a Super Bowl. You don't cope. You've won, kid. I'm 40 years old. For 32 years, I've hoped just to get to the Super Bowl, and you've won one. The audacity that you have to ask me this question about your pain after you've won a championship and have been to 2 Super Bowls in the last 3 years pisses me off to no end. I'm just desperate to sniff the thought of going to the Super Bowl. And so I don't have any real answer for you. As a matter of fact, I'm happy that you have pain. As a matter of fact, I want to bring you more physical pain. So come see me in New York so I can punch you in the mouth.
How would you suggest an indie artist use his or her marketing money when royalty checks come 6 months later?
You know, look, I mean, this is a cash flow game, and I get it. I would say to be patient in the first 6 months and eat, noodles and sleep on a couch and get side jobs and go garage sailing and flip stuff on eBay. And I mean, there's a million, get side jobs, babysit. I don't care. The thought that like, oh, woe is me. I actually have money coming one day. It's just not here yet. What do I do for the next 6 months? I don't know. Like travel the world for free and hitchhike. There's some kid hitchhiking right now from Vancouver to my office because he wants to be on the AskGaryVee show and he's getting by through the kindness of people. I think a great thing to do for 6 months as a musician is to travel the world and hitchhike because you'll get new experiences and it should help you write great new music. I mean, this is a silly question. It speaks to art skills, not business skills. What you do is you wait. And then once it starts happening, you only have to wait for 6 months because then it's continuous. Then the royalties just keep on coming. And so, you just should really focus on producing good enough music that royalties continue to come. I'm sure that a lot of people who create and produce music right now are pissed right now that I'm answering this because 99% of them are like, how the hell do I even get royalties, let alone wait for the next 6 months? I mean, that's a silly question. I would say enjoy yourself, chill out. I don't care, zen out, go on the beach and smoke weed. I don't care what you want to do to make yourself happy. Once it starts coming is the real question, which is how do you reinvest those dollars in, for example, targeting on Facebook fans of the genre of music that you produce and taking your royalties and spending it for your future. The real question here is when you get into some money, what do you do with it? Do you triple down on your career and try to get more people to hear your music so you make more money in the future? Or do you buy a Toyota Camry? I mean, so that to me is a far more interesting question than what do I do for the 6 months before the money gets here?